And follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again on Inside OC.
Okay,
good
it was
job,
really
good
nice.
job. Yeah,
it was very sweet, man.
Well, you know, I really, I mean, he was key. He really was. And over the years when I'd see him, you know, I'd always think, oh, and he'd always, oh, it was just, you know, such a natural thing. I mean, the guy just,
what a nice guy.
Immediately, yeah.
Very classy. I like that.
Yeah.
Very, very classy on your part. It's nice to get recognized.
So let's talk about the other, any other election, any other observation on the election?
His observation is the most stark one, which is this idea, again, of public safety tax. Your taxes are going to go up because you have a bunch of Republican politicians who want to give law enforcement and firefighters massive benefits, right, because they need their endorsements. And it's like Republican or Democrat, it doesn't matter.
Then there's Costa Mesa, where the Republicans went down. Now, wasn't that also, I mean, in Costa Mesa, you had, they took out the majority, Mensinger, you know, lost his seat. And Mensinger and Righeimer and Monahan were really pushing the public employee unions, and they lost.
No, but that's consistent with what we're pointing out, not counter evidence. The fact is that cops and firefighters make a very, let's call it primal sort of appeal.
Oh, no, totally agree. I'm just saying that I don't think it's necessarily a Republican, Democrat thing. I would argue it's bipartisan, which I think you do. But Republicans are a little more resistant to the unions than
look, in Santa Ana, they had a takeover of the council led by Democrats. Miguel Polito, who literally stood up and said, we need more cops. And we need more cops because they have money to send mail.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a dynamic here that is beyond, this is what should be, Trump is nothing. This is what should be terrifying every American that lives, is that you're basically having a police state put on top of you. And when they lavish them with pension benefits and everything else, and people like John Morlock say, well, the government will fall apart. And this is what I used to argue with John all the time, and say, it won't fall apart, they'll just get more taxes.
That's right.
To just keep creating it. It'll be a bigger and bigger and bigger state.
At some time, though, you run up against mathematics. You know,
I don't know, man.
You can only take 100% of people's paychecks, and then there's nothing
they expand the pie.
Yeah, the question is how long the public will put up with the fact that firefighters cost $250,000 and most cops right now in Orange County cost somewhere between 150 and 200 grand per year. You can't afford much more public safety as that number goes up.
Right.
You have to cut the number of public safety officials.
Hold that thought, because that gets me to the last thing that I did want to talk about. Didn't have time on the show, but let's talk about it now. And that really is a case, I think, that brings out the absurdity of the current pension situation. And that is Fullerton Police Chief Dan Hughes retired recently. He retired. And by the way, from every account, sounds like a great guy, terrific lawman. So I've got nothing against Dan Hughes, but he retires at age 51, 31 years in. He gets a pension, $206,000 a year. So he's 51, and now have the burdens of being a cop for 30 years so worn this guy down that he's ready for the wheelchair and the retirement home? No. Guess what?
New job.
New job. He is the VP of Security and Emergency Services for Disneyland Resort. He is the top lawman at arguably the biggest venue in the Western United States. I would argue a bigger job than even being Fullerton. I mean, this is a guy who is so young, so vigorous, that he's now taking over this job where I'm sure he'll be making even better bucks. And it said he couldn't wait for Monday so he could leave the one job and start the next one. And he's got a pension, $200,000. And again, it's not that I begrudge these guys their pensions, but at some point you say, whoa. I mean,
well, you'd have to have what, $6-7 million in assets, throwing off $250,000 a year. He is a millionaire because of this job. Now, there are some people out there who might say that's fine. You should be a millionaire if you lead the Fullerton PD. Fullerton PD, I would argue, is not the model of policing, maybe, for North America. Although they say he had a lot to do with some of the reforms that went on. Delighted. But the fact is still, the citizens who live in that town will be bearing this burden for the next, probably 30 years if the guy lives actuarially to 84. And he's got great health care. So for the next 30 years,
and
people...
there's 50 others.
Now, Norberto, if any firefighters or police officers call you and give you heck for being on a show where we talk about this stuff, just tell them to call me, okay?
I get plenty of phone calls from all over
and you
town.
do, and that's the thing that I think people also, I mean, hey, it goes with the job. No one's going to cry crocodile tears. But when you're trying to do a job as a reporter, and we've all encountered it to some extent, but I think in your case maybe more severely, that it's kind of the people who are supporting you, funding you, or whatever, and I've never had any trouble with my sponsors. I want to make that clear. But but that the people who support you kind of say, why did you write that? This doesn't serve the purpose, and you got to explain to them, I'm a journalist.
I get a lot. This is what Voice of OC stands for, is to be engine mechanics. Open it up, whether it's, in a sense, criticizing public safety, or, I mean, look, the district attorney of this county is not a big fan of mine. The guy who wants to challenge him, Todd Spitzer, is also not a big fan of mine.
What's wrong with you, Norberto?
He just doesn't like anybody.
I ask uncomfortable questions, and we go after things like documents that, again, show what people do. And when you go after that, it triggers nasty remarks. As you said, we don't have the finances to pay every single police officer $200,000 and do anything else. There's also this odd notion in our politics that the only thing that enhances public safety is a police officer. When in reality, good schools, good roads, bridges, jobs, all of those things, open space, and this is my biggest issue, our county supervisors, they don't do what I'm willing to do, which is take stuff from both sides and do their job, which is balance a budget in a responsible manner.
Well, this is part of what's so interesting to me with your Todd Spitzer story, that, again, you've got a guy who is running for DA or who was likely to run for DA, and who is waving a gun around in public, calls himself a conservative, and yet is led. He leads all other county supervisors, I think, in funds collected from public safety officers and firefighters, you name it. I mean, this guy is a union friend. He's part of the 2001 coalition that voted for retroactive pay for deputies for their pensions, right, which has created instantly $100 million in unfunded liability, and I don't know what the number is now.
Right.
This is not a fiscal conservative, despite his own protestations.
Excellent points. I would just like to clarify one
Please
thing.
do.
When you said waving the gun around, you meant that in a figurative sense.
I'm sorry, figuratively.
Because he did not. By
He
any
waved
account.
a fanny pack around.
That's right.
Which in some circles is less polite.
Okay, all right, fine. Okay, now you're being very funny. Okay, good. But he was not waving his gun around. Okay, so let's. Anyway, on that,
I apologize.
should we? On that high point, should we wave goodbye to our viewers? Okay.